Welcome to Reroute Reflections, a podcast about what it really takes to change direction with intention. Around here, we believe change works better when we take the time to reflect and, when necessary, reroute. We're here to challenge assumptions, share stories, and discuss the tools that can help us navigate change with confidence. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Reroute Reflections. I am so excited about this episode. It has been a long time coming, but the promise that I gave you on episode 1 of season 2 about having a guest, I'm finally able to fulfill that. So we've got our first guest on today's episode, Yvonne Thevenot. Yvonne is I like to call, I think she'd say we're friends. We are definitely colleagues. We've been in contact a number of years now. She's also an independent contractor consultant as I am. And I've been waiting for the opportunity to interview her. So I couldn't be more excited and thrilled to have her on the podcast today. A little bit about Yvonne. Yvonne has had a very successful career in the financial services industry as a financial services executive. She launched her independent change consulting practice, which is based out of Toronto in the same area that I am located. And she's been consulting for 17 long, hard-working years. Pretty incredible stuff. She is drawn extensively on her firsthand experience in change management as a sponsor of change, business lead, and change manager at both a strategic as well as a tactical level. She has degrees from both the University of Manitoba here in Canada and Dalhousie University, which is also my alma mater. Her passion for learning continues. She has more designations than I have ever seen an individual possessing. In addition to that, she is also an agrologist, which is somebody who specializes in agriculture, which is kind of how she got her start in financial services, where both of us kind of started. She is also a certified financial planner and a certified mentor, among a number of other things. She is a accredited change manager from both the Change Management Institute as well as the Association of Change Management Professionals. Her clients included several Canadian major chartered banks, fintech startups, commercial agribusinesses, not surprisingly as an agrologist, and government crown agencies at the provincial and federal level. She is a trusted advisor, thought partner, and change advocate, and I am super excited to have had the opportunity to talk to her today. We talk about a lot of things. Today's episode is really going to be focusing on two main things. First off, we're both entrepreneurs. Me entering into my fourth year now, just finishing off my third year. And her, of course, having 17 years as a change management professional, independent consultant. And so we spend some time talking about our journey, the ups, the downs, what got us to where we are today, the powerful impact the community of change managers has on and where it's evolved really from where it started when she got into it to now. She's basically seen it from the start to where it is today. So really interesting opportunity to chat with her about, what has transpired and where the future, what the future holds for both of us. We also talk specifically on stakeholder engagement, talking about the benefits, the ups and downs also of working with stakeholders, how important they are, and the different perspectives that you have to have as an independent consultant when you think about, stakeholders. It's different from an employee. They're not your colleagues. They are your clients. You work for them. And so how do you balance that relationship? Because you're always, as an independent, coming in and trying to provide direction and advice on how to do things maybe a little bit differently. So we spend a lot of time talking about the dynamics of, not just you coming in as an independent to help support a change project and managing change for those users, usually employees, but you're also trying to manage the change of you coming in as an independent, changing the way people do things to improve on some of the pitfalls and struggles and challenges they've had in the past. We also get a really interesting question that comes through our change mail. So really exciting, really great conversation. I am so excited to dive in, and I really hope that you enjoy the first of many guests to join Reroute Reflections this season. So I will stop talking here alone and we will cut right to the episode. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you all for listening. Really excited to hear what you guys think about today's episode. And again, the guests will keep coming. So I am really excited for what the rest of the season holds. Take care, everybody, and I will talk to you in a second. Hello, everybody. Great to be back. This is episode, I think it's 4 now, and I am so excited to welcome Yvonne Thevenot to the podcast. You are our first guest on the podcast. This is the 4th episode. I promised everybody that this season will have guests. You are the first one, so welcome to Reroute Reflections.
How honored am I? I will try to set a very high bar for anyone that follows Andrew.
I'm sure you will, honestly. Yvonne and I, we have been talking, I guess, for the last couple of years. I know when I started Reroute Consulting, I having us being alma maters or Dalhousie being alma mater of both of us. I think that's when we connected, and so we've talked over the years as I was starting Reroute Consulting and as I was going through the ups and downs. So I'm really excited to have you on the podcast to just, one, just have like a 40-minute conversation, just you and me. But also, I'm sure will be really valuable for people to hear kind of your story and how you got started. So I know I did a little bit of an intro of you before we got started to kind of preview the podcast, but maybe give a little bit of a background on yourself and where you're at today.
That sounds great. A lot of times the question is, how did you get into change management? And that forms part of the introduction in the background. And of course, there's the formal stuff about transitioning out of corporate, moving into an entrepreneurship environment. And then there are other parts that don't fall into an introduction. And one of those I think of is in my last 10 years in corporate, my job was eliminated 7 times. And so in that journey, I was both a leader supporting the change for the people around me, but also impacted by change. Change at the time, very new discipline. And so trying to learn how to make it better, making a lot of mistakes along the way, really has been part of what started me on this journey and has really become part of the fiber of who I am as a change manager. I supported that initial interest with certifications, accreditations, also with change community membership, in that I was one of the founding members of the Change Management Institute in Canada back in 2013, and have achieved sort of top certifications from both the Change Management Institute as well as the Association of Change Management Professionals. Um, a key area that I spend time thinking about is how does change come to life and achieve the business goals that really are at the root of why change management exists in my context, making it easier for people, but also achieving those business results. And just really love bringing a variety of my background to that, whether it's my undergrad in agriculture or the work that I've done with Dalhousie University. I've been privileged to go back there a couple of times as a participant in their MBA capstone. Andrew, can you remember back the MBA capstone?
Oof, I
And
remember it very well. It was my favorite time.
being able to be a part of that journey for a bunch of students as well. So I do mentoring. I have a ton of things that link me to change management, but that's sort of the introduction behind the introduction.
Yeah, and I love that, and I feel like I see so much similarities between how you approach change and how I do. Is this like the value of having all of these various different perspectives together? You seem to be a real fan of like continuous learning, and it just change is evolving so constantly, and there's just so many factors, both that are in your face and invisible to you on the surface, and so you really can't stop that pursuit of like trying to approach it with curiosity, right? And I feel like you kind of you do that. I mean, for me, coming from a science background, diving into the element of change management and business, people would always kind of question that to be like, how are you like? How did like what made you like? How did you get here, right? Basically, like you didn't do business in undergrad. Um, And it was a psychology degree too, which is like some very similar to kind of what I do, kind of marrying the business world and in the change management psychology world. But even your experience within agriculture, like it formed, I imagine, your ability to kind of move into the banking space, start to support the agricultural customers, farmers, and then you started to like branch out, no pun intended, into change management in business. So it's the various it's having that like curiosity, I think, in change management is just super important. And I didn't know you were a founding member of CMI. Wow, that's remarkable.
In Canada. In
In
Canada. It had
Canada.
been
Yeah.
existing for some time globally.
Yeah.
And yeah, they approached a small group in Canada and we started grinding through what it takes to bring that presence to a new country. It's just another
Yeah.
change learning journey, right?
Right, exactly. I recently joined ACMP last year, attended the Change Chicago conference this past year. I think it was in May, and it was amazing to see change people all together. I think for especially for us, I guess, as independent consultants primarily, we are it kind of can feel sort of lonely, right? Like you feel like you're kind of coming into an organization, you're not like part of the team, but you're like trying to be part of the team. And what I found really great was to have that sense of community in Chicago, to see like all of these different people, a lot of them independent consultants themselves, to just kind of share experiences and also just to make you feel like, hey, you're not alone, people see the struggle. So I love these organizations that are starting to stand up and starting to get really, really popular, because I think it really motivated me coming from Change Chicago, coming out of that, to be like, all right, like I'm motivated to continue on I've learned so much from other people. And I think that's the real kind of concept of the season, is like trying to learn from others and try to build up your strategy, how you approach things, and maybe think outside of the box a bit, is really what we're trying to communicate, at least this season. So speaking of all of that, like entrepreneurship and being independent and stuff, I figure, because the two of us are independent, let's talk about that first. Because I think there is so much to unpack there. So you talked about your job being eliminated 7 times. First of all, wow, good for you for coming out of that. People, you know, one is usually enough. And so what made you kind of take that transition from like into independent consulting, like once that happened to you?
So when I left the organization I was with, it was 2007. Financial services was going through a bit of a financial crisis, drawing from the US instability and all of the madness that had happened there. Canada was not impacted, of course, in the same extent, but there was a lot of shoring up. And so when I left the organization, there just really wasn't that many senior jobs available. So I was invited to participate as a subject matter expert on business banking with a team, with a consulting firm, on the basis that they couldn't hire me. They wanted to subcontract me. And at the time, there's lots of subcontracting that would go on with IT professionals, but it was a pretty rare thing on the business professional side. And so at that time, they brought me in as a subcontracted business professional. So I was an independent practitioner supporting the work of that team. Time passed over the duration of that assignment and things stabilized, and I was offered the opportunity to join the organization. And by that time, I had about 6 months under my belt. Um, and I realized that I kind of liked this idea of being independent. There's an aspect of our change management profession that requires a real outside in view, requires a bit of that neutral third party view in terms of the things that are being recommended or being considered. And I elected to just stay on as an independent. And then as that concluded, started to seek another independent assignment. The journey as an independent, of course, has in organizations has evolved since that time, because something that was very rare on the business side now is quite common. And so finding an engagement as a change practitioner assigned to a specific project for a period of time is certainly far more common in today's world than it was at that time. You know,
Yeah.
you get leads that are specifically oriented to that. So
Mhm.
that's what happened. I had an opportunity, tried it out. No one was hiring. It was a great alternative at the time, and it felt like the right pair of shoes. It just felt like it really fit.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. I think when I started, which was 2022, right? So, and I do recall that period of time because I was not in um at like I was not working full time in 2007, 2008. I was still in university, but I definitely still experienced what the financial crisis was. Both my parents are from banking, so I like this, and I started in banking. Not surprisingly, it was I always said it was a family business, and so I honestly thought I was going to stay in banking my entire career. But I do remember like the stress and that time and the idea of independent consultants outside of or consultants in general outside of the big four, big five, was almost like non-existent. And then it almost it feels like started around that time and built up to where it is today, where people are just you people like yourselves have almost built that foundation up for people like me to be able to do what I'm doing. And I love that idea of like the value proposition that ICs bring to organizations around this, the third party perspective, outside in perspective versus like the employees who are almost like too close to it to kind of see outside of the box, and to provide different opinions and especially in change management where you're constantly looking for new innovative ways to like change people's behavior. And as soon as people, have seen newsletter after newsletter after newsletter, it's almost like time to say, okay, can we like maybe go beyond newsletters and let's think about something else as a way to like engage people. And it's hard to do that when all you are experienced is like that one organization. And so having us come in and share ideas and best practices from different organizations is really valuable to people. And I know one of the topics we want to discuss is like how do we kind of come in as outsiders and build that relationship with these folks who we haven't had experience working with, and how do we kind of build a solid effective relationship to move these projects forward. But I definitely see the difficulty that must have been having been one of the first to kind of do this. So like as you were, and I mean, I've also worked as like an independent for like a bigger consulting firm as well. And so the kind of the highs and lows of that is quite apparent. It's great because they're funneling business to you, but typically they'll have their own set of ways of working, ways of doing things that may not be kind of the way that you like to work, and so you're almost having to adjust with their approach. So it's not like 100% you. And I feel like with my experience working there, it almost like cemented my like passion and drive to really be on my own and like actually set the stage and set the ways of working, the approach, the strategy on my own, instead of having to follow that. So it almost like cemented this idea like, yeah, I do want to be independent. I do want to kind of like forge my own path.
I love being able to use the tools from other organizations, and certainly have found that in working with different client groups. And I've found that if you can merge lanes with the client group, try to adopt or adapt, if necessary, the tools that they are familiar with, it really feels a little bit more like home to them, a little less
Mm,
foreign, and certainly you get the benefit of that experience curve or that understanding that, oh, this is just like we do project management side. Yes, it works in partnership with project management. Here's the similar spaces that it plays in. Oh, how does this fit with scrums and agile applications? oh, well, here's your Scrum or your Agile framework. And so here are the points where change needs to interject. So being able to have your own clear view of what you consider the components of that change cycle, change support environment, and then being able to draw on others' frameworks to be able to support it, I find is really, really a compelling way of building that credibility. You talked about when you go into an organization, they're, who are you? Yvonne, the independent consultant. And yet, as you can quickly show, here's how your tools will help us achieve the objective. Let's layer in this activity or this cadence or this application of it. It creates a little bit of that space where we're bringing the best of the organization and what we have at the table for knowledge and experience at the same time.
Mhm. And as you were talking, I just started to think about like the timing of when you started and like all of the different like frameworks and things that have kind of come up as you've been independent, right? Like I think about the whole Six Sigma, sort of like era and like DevOps bridging the business and IT together so that they're not operating in silos and all the work around that. And then you mentioned agile, so like the which is I still think still on a journey of like transitioning from like that waterfall based methodology to, agile scrum. And I know you've done a lot of work in that space. Can you maybe talk about your experience having to like work in these eras that you're trying to shift people's perspective away from what they've been doing for decades around like waterfall into agile and how that's been?
It's been, first of all, it's a learning journey for myself as well. I've drawn on the learning of many experts to try to bring into my toolkit an understanding of how and where things fit. Similar to the core agile philosophies, though, that so much of it depends on listening to your customers. Now, what creates an interesting complexity is that in an organization, most of my work is done with large corporates as an independent consultant. In an organization, you will have teams or people, sponsors that think in an agile way. So, how do we get things out to the market as quickly as possible, release continuous value? And then you will have leaders that think in very much of more of a waterfall structure. Neither is right or wrong. It's partly the environments they, kind of grew up in a corporate sense, and partly a function of personality as well. Some people just like to know dot A through to dot Z. Others are okay with it being sort of this, well, we're working on G this week because B was just in development. So in that journey, really listening to the customers, understanding the customers, meaning the clients we're supporting, understanding what is it that they are trying to solve, and then leveraging those applications in that context. So in most agile environments, the customers are seen to be, of course, the external customer, the person who's paying the bills. But as an independent practitioner, our customers are actually inside the house. And so by being able to balance or hear different customer perspectives, you can also sometimes help bridge the language inside that wheel as well. It's
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
this is creating a challenge here, this is creating a challenge here. What what would need to be true for us to draw on the best of both of these worlds and achieve the objectives of both of these worlds?
Yeah, I it's funny that you bring that up because you see that so much. Like you come in and you're managing a change, whether that be ERP implementation and M&A or whatever it is, and your focus is on, the impacted folks from that are going to be using that platform, but also the change is in the project team itself too, and like how are you working together in an effective way, how are you bridging all of those, what their goals are. Like ultimately we have one ultimate goal, but like the different personalities that you kind of mentioned, some people just want to get stuff done and want to get stuff done quickly. Others want to, collaborate and they want to assimilate and they want to go back to the drawing board and get it to a place where they're feeling super comfortable before they do anything about it. Some people want to test things out first. And you're trying to, as an independent, because you're working not just with like, you're working with like HR, you're working with IT, you're working with procurement, you're working on all these different groups, and all of them may have different ways of doing it, but ultimately your goal is to get them aligned and, actually trying to achieve that one goal, which is to get people using the new system, get people to like assimilate those cultures together. And it's like a change within a change within a change, which can be incredibly difficult and something you don't necessarily feel like you're signing up for when you start.
I think linked to that is also knowing yourself.
Mm.
I have a huge, I would say, degree of impatience and a strong bias for action, and that doesn't always work. It doesn't help a change practitioner to be, you know, pulling the bus away and everybody's standing on the curb. And so trying to match stride with your client, trying to, of course, pull them along with your expertise and knowledge and the things that you can help help build their understanding and support is critical. And part of that is that you're going to work with stakeholders where they also have that same, kind of approach that is maybe your natural approach. And you're going to work with some where they have different approaches. And so being able to know yourself, your own biases, put a pin in that when necessary, because it could work to your detriment, and then meet your clients where they're at is is a good discipline and something I remind myself and relearn every single day.
Yeah, I feel like I am still learning that piece for sure. I mean, I think naturally I am very much an executor. I think that's why I love change management is because 9 times out of 10 they're getting you there to like do stuff. I've worked in strategy before and most of my career has been in execution type roles in change management, but I love doing stuff. I love getting stuff out and seeing the reaction and adjusting on the fly and that pressure you just don't get when you're like setting like a strategy at the highest level and then passing it off to somebody else to execute. So that's definitely what I like to do. I think what's really valuable for me is that I do tend to underplay my skills. I think, and it sounds like it's a negative, but sometimes it actually works in my favor. Where I always assume I'm the dumbest person in the room, and so for me, it's like I'm trying to gather as much insight and value from everybody else because I truly believe that they are better equipped to come up with an approach than I am, and I'm just trying to get the voices together. So that assimilator type role is something that I really enjoy doing because at the end of the day it's like if I can get the outcome or the thing that we do to land as best as we can, then I am happy, and that's ultimately what my goal is. But the element of impatience sometimes is just like, come on, guys, let's just. There is like, and I think on everything in life there is almost like a spectrum, right? There is too much collaboration that can be detrimental, and there can be too much like going with pace. Sometimes we do need to like step back and be like, okay, let's think about this. And then there are also times where you're just like, all right, guys, let's move. We've been talking about this for months. So
It's interesting that you commented on sometimes we're the wind beneath the wings, like we're enabling the teams, the leaders, the environment around us in order to create a successful change. And sometimes the art and the science of what we do is very fluid and certainly not prescriptive from one environment to another. And I remember one of my business leads saying to me, "I have no idea what it is you do, Yvonne, but I just know everything's easier when you're here." Uh, and that's fun to get that kind of feedback. I also have learned though that as I move into new teams or new business environments, I also have to be ready with, I'll call it that elevator pitch of who I am, why I'm an expert at what I do, why it's a good thing that they have an expert on the team, their knowledge and capability and knowledge of change management, knowledge of the business is also very important. That there are things that I will bring to the table that they do not have in their own toolkit. And I know sometimes a person might think, well, why else are you there? However, you might be brought in by a team, by a sponsor, by an individual, and now you have to make that large matrix environment that is the world known as implementation understand and believe that that element of credibility and that element of adding value.
Yeah, and it's always different is I think the thing that can be a real struggle. And I mean, you talk about the elevator pitch, and as you were saying that, I was like thinking in the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't even know what I would say. Like people ask me this all the time. They're like, "So what do you do?" And I'm like, I have no idea how to describe it, you know? And it's like because I feel like it's so different all the time. Sometimes I come in and it's like just trying to give them like a solid sense of how do we bring all of these different like what each of these work streams are kind of doing in a way that's going to be cohesive, consistent to like the end user who's going to receive these messages so that they're not just getting these piecemeal bites and not really sure how they all kind of integrate together. Other times it's like I'm almost like a project manager to be like, all right, you guys need to talk to each other. You know, you guys aren't talking and like you guys need to align.
You
Sometimes
say
like I'm a
project manager, I say marriage counselor.
well, that's it too. Sometimes you're like a therapist, you know. It's like people were calling you, be like, Andrew, I gotta talk to you. Like, I can't do this anymore. You're like, you can't. We'll get through this. You know, just sit down, lie down, have a glass of water. You know, we're gonna get through it. And so how do you put that into like an elevator pitch? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I am. Just know to your point, like, hopefully people will give me that. I hope people will say the same thing about me. Like, life is easier when you're around.
So as a change manager, very often we'll turn a position into a question. And so then it will be, and how tall is the building in which I'm in this elevator?
Yeah, that's so true. Honestly, I mean, oh, that's such a tough thing, and I've always been telling myself I need to like come up with an elevator pitch for myself. But yeah, how big is this building? We're gonna need at least 120 floors for me to actually like get something out, and I'm pretty sure it's not gonna be a coherent by the time I'm through with it. So we talked a lot about stakeholders, both from the standpoint of those who will be impacted, but also those within the project team themselves, which I mean, I find are like the toughest of the two groups, just to make sure that one, people understand like, and I mean, even for me, like I struggle to like be able to articulate what my role and responsibility is sometimes. So how do we get like these stakeholders to really see that we're working with them, not against them? You know, I'm sure you've experienced times where as an independent, you're hired to come in to give advice. But not everyone likes to hear advice. So is there any best practices that you've used to kind of help make sure that those roles and responsibilities are established and reinforced early, often, so that we can all move together in the right direction?
You're making it sound very utopian, and I don't know if it ever achieves that vision, but it's a great
It's good.
place to start.
It's good to hear you say that. Honestly, it makes me feel a lot better about myself.
Um, Early in change management, we often get exposed to the WIIFM, so the radio station known as What's in It for Me. And usually we have that framing in context of end users, so people who actually need to make and adopt the change. The truth is that applies to anybody that you're working with. You know, that person, that project manager that you're working with might have a dream of being a program director. Might, if they're an independent as well, might have a dream of having a contract renewal. Uh, how work gets defined as success for every individual is really important in terms of helping build the environment that helps them be successful, and therefore helps the change execute in a more effective way. So as sort of as trite as it might be, that what's in it for me, understanding that for the various individuals is important. Also important not to assume. And from that perspective, that means finding a way to have those informal coffees and get to know the person, and learning that the most important thing to them is actually not going over their 3 o'clock end time on Wednesdays because they take their kids to soccer that night and
Hmm.
that's their family commitment. And understanding those things can help you find a way to normalize that and make that absolutely part of their success profile. And even finding ways to then help the organization support that as well. Hey, I can lead that meeting that's Wednesday at 4 because I think you take your kids to soccer and they're having such a good season. I know you don't want to miss that. And so being proactive with those indicators of support and alignment and team teamwork definitely is part of that. I think the trickiest spot is when the best thing for a stakeholder might be the last thing they want to do. And so linked to that would be there's routines in organizations that might be certain update sequence or framework uh, for the senior executive. Many project managers have their own preferred style of communication in terms of update. The reality is that unless you frame it in a way that the executive is accustomed to seeing it or receiving it or internalizing it, somehow, as good as that alternative view might be, it just doesn't feel like comfortable or the right level of information. So sometimes, even working with stakeholders, a project manager, and saying, well, you know, Andrew really likes the information in this format. I know this is the format that you're producing to help ensure your project is running in an aligned way. Is there a way that we could integrate some of that information in this format that Andrew loves, is very familiar with, so that the information is easier for him to consume and receive? So sometimes that feels like making things more complicated or, injecting a view when it's really maybe none of my business. And yet, knowing that that could help that person be so much more successful with their executive level communications, to me, is worth sort of pinching across that relationship to say, have you considered, here's the rationale. I can support you on transitioning a first cut of the information if that's helpful, and positioning it in that way. So taking sort of the what's in it for me, but reframing it as well sometimes to say, you might not even know this is good for you, and here's why.
Hmm. Yeah, and I feel like I've seen so many examples, especially having worked with other consultants or consulting groups as a subcontractor, where sometimes they push like their cookie cutter sort of approach or style of like status reporting or like governance structure onto an organization that may not be used to it. And in some cases they're coming in as a external source, a very reputable organization, and so people almost initially get like, yeah, I'm gonna do what they say, and then slowly as you're week 1, 4, 8, 12, you're like, is anyone even looking at these things anymore? It's And so really trying to kind of take a step back before you launch something to be like, this has worked every single time that we've had a client. It's like really doing that initial step, which I feel like always gets overlooked, and I'm at fault at doing this sometimes too, is really breaking it down to like, we are all people at the end of the day. Just understand the individuals in front of you. And me actually remembering that somebody has a kid in soccer that they have to go to watch their game every Wednesday night, is far more valuable and will build way more rapport than me giving them a status update template, you know? And if you say it like that, it kind of sounds obvious, but like I feel like we spend so much time on like perfecting a status update template rather than just like having a conversation with people to understand like, hey, what do you want from me and how can I help you get there so that we're all aligned and working as effectively as possible. And I think it was really that simple. It's just like talk to people, be empathetic, be accountable, not just for like the work that you're doing, but just in general, like the overall success of the project. And so, where as an independent, you need to lean in to help like elevate people, whether it's part of your statement of work or not, is irrelevant. You are there to help build people up, you know, in whatever way that means, so that the overall project is a success. And I love that comment that you made, which I wrote down and highlighted, that success portfolio. It's like, and if I'm understanding it correctly, it's like every person has their own, like, you know, what success looks like for them. And each individual has a different one, right? So understanding what that success portfolio is to them, knowing that each individual in the project team is probably going to have their own set of criteria is really, I think, the goal as like a first step.
And part of how that shares into the shared vision. So ultimately, we're at work to achieve something. That collective view of the shared vision, I know we have experts like Cotter that talk about how a shared vision is such a critical part of leading change. And as you as you create that shared vision, it's very important to help being able to keep pointing to that and saying, is what we're doing moving us towards there? But also as important is understanding from an individual perspective, professional as well as personal, how the things that they do each and every day contributes towards that shared vision. And so sometimes being able to break it down on the layers of tactical implementation from strategic to tactical is actually even more important than really kind of that stated vision statement. It's like, and this is how the work that you do today in the balance, your professional, personal, helps you bring the best of you to the party that can contribute towards that ultimate corporate shared vision of success.
I love that. It's so true. And I know we've talked about this before, you know, individually. And I know I've talked about this on the podcast in the past. It's this element of like, and you kind of shared about it earlier too. It's like there's all these different perspectives around change management and what's effective. And no one really answers it in totality. But leveraging all of these different ideas will come to a like an ability to pull from the toolkit and say what applies in this scenario or applies in this situation. And Cotter, I always find is like high level, very interesting, makes a lot of sense. Like totally get it. Like burning platform, 100%. If I'm on a burning platform, I'm gonna jump for sure. Like I'm gonna take action. But in the context of an organization, especially when you're dealing with a project team, it's like, yeah, that's great. Like we'll have a vision, but like, what do I do now? Right? Is what a lot of people want to know and see. And I that's the piece where you're gonna have to pull from other things to try and get you to like you've got the vision, but now how do you execute it in a way that gets as many people as you can coming along that journey with you and not against you.
I love drawing on frameworks from a broad range of places because each of us brings our own personal kind of bias or I always remember to do this, but I sometimes I get to do this and brings that to the work that we do. And so that's where constructs like Cotter's Leading Change, like the Change Management Institute, Change Management Body of Knowledge and their competencies framework. That's where I find I really like being able to lay those on a table and say, okay,
Mhm.
there's the ones that you always go to and you know that you're really good at doing those things. But have you actually touched or tapped on these elements of this framework? It's not saying that the framework, any of them, are perfect or everything you need at that point in time, but it's more how as an independent practitioner, you continue to pull your own thread of accountability
Hmm.
across that ecosystem. And your comment about the conference that you attended and the ability to interact with other change practitioners, like always being in a space where you're learning and embracing that new knowledge and finding different ways of looking at things is really important, because
Hmm.
many times you are the only change practitioner on a project, and then trying to know and understand the rest of the world that's around you is also important. But it also helps you kind of be in that environment where it's like, okay, I'm not crazy. This does
Hmm.
happen in other places as well. And being
Yeah.
able to gain the re-energizing that happens when you interact with that space.
Yeah, I know it's so true. I couldn't agree more. It's like these frameworks are built from situations where they've worked, and so there is value in what they're saying. That's not to say that it will apply in every single situation exactly the same way, but there's elements of it that probably will, and it's important for us to understand them so that we can recognize when there's an opportunity to leverage, that best practice in the situation that we're in. So yeah, continuous learning in the space of change management, I think, is a huge, huge benefit. All right. So I think this is a great discussion. I feel like I can talk to you for probably hours, but we have a set period of time with you. So I want to make sure that we are able to, you know, dive into kind of the closing, which was really the first and foremost thing that I wanted to make sure that we touch on is a segment that we call change mail. Which sounds almost like the stuff that warriors put on just before a fight, like the chain mail, but this is change mail. And so this is an opportunity where we've had a question come in or a challenge that somebody is facing, and I want to get your thought on it. And we'll talk just really quickly on it. So the question that came in is, um, for the challenge is, I'm an independent consultant and I've been having trouble with a client of mine right now and need some advice. The team I am supporting doesn't want to take any of my recommendations. I've tried to show value early and often, but they continue to want to disregard the plan that I've put together and do their own thing. They are willing to include me in meetings, almost it seems to check a box and say that change management was present, but when it comes to following the plan I put together, they agree on the surface, but in the background do their own thing. I'm not sure how to approach this. I've tried escalating it to the project lead, their superiors, and still nothing seems to move the needle. I'm starting to wonder whether this engagement is something I'm better off walking away from. Wow. I know, right? I'm sure we've all been in these situations before. What advice can you give to this person?
So first of all, and the short answer would be know yourself, and if you're not really not feeling fulfilled, then it's on you to make that decision and
Mhm.
figure out if it's time to try something else. That is one of the beauties of being independent practitioner, is that you own your decisions. You own your decisions to lean in, you own your decisions to step out. And so understand that and accept that we are where we are by the choices we've made. So that is definitely part of the advice that I would share. I would say, you know, sometimes those seeds that you're planting, they are going somewhere. It just takes time. It takes time to germinate. It takes time for it to feel familiar. And, they're your clients. If they want you to come in and file the files and sweep the floor, it's ultimately their call. They are the client. Um, Obviously, through a statement of work, that's not why they've brought you in, but how you get there is the beauty that a change professional brings, is always trying to find a way around the mountain and a way to
Mhm.
small bites, big bites, small bites, big bites, iterative impact, iterative approaches. And there's this idea of helping them frame it in their own context. So this is the idea of getting it to be their idea. So how do you go about that? And often it is merging lanes with what is their desired approach to a problem, and then finding a way to enable that desired approach, leveraging the art and science that you bring to the table as a change professional, and the credibility that they have as people who have supported and led change up to that time. So remember that time we had that town hall and you got all those really tough questions, but after that, the rumblings really settled down, and then people did start reading your biweekly update. Things like that, where you can demonstrate to them the effectiveness of whatever change component it is they brought to the table, and then taking advantage of that as sharing their own best practices, leveraging their own best practices based on their experience.
Hmm. I think that's solid. I mean, the only thing I would add to what you're talking about is just what we kind of alluded to earlier, which is that idea of maybe get back to the basics and, you know, have conversations with these individuals one on one, build that rapport up. If you are seen as like a friend or a person that they like, they're probably more likely to listen to you and do what you're saying, So maybe just like schedule some coffee chats and get to know some of these people so that you can build that rapport outside of like a group conversation, group call. And maybe that will, you know, help you with getting some influence within this group. But you said it right. If the client is telling you what to do, you got to do what the client wants. Again, if at the end of the day you just very clearly still continue to drive the value that you said you were going to drive in the statement of work, if you said you were going to help pull together the change and implementation plans and they don't do it, that's on them essentially. You still need to go there, do the best that you can to put those plans together, whether they use it or not. That's ultimately on them, but that you can't stop doing that. You got to still do what you said you're going to do. But at the end of the day, you can't change everybody, and that includes, and we know that when it comes to the impacted users. At the end of the day, we know not everyone's going to follow what we say we ask them to do. Not everyone's going to read our communication, and same goes with project teams. There's certain people within the project team that are just not going to listen. They've got their own way of doing things, and you can try, but I think the best way is just to be authentic, show them that you're there to help, be accountable to your success and their success, and just try to be empathetic, because if they're pushing back that hard, there's probably a reason, and try to uncover what that reason is so that you guys can all work together as effectively as possible. And you know what? If it is really affecting you as an independent from a mental wellness standpoint, you can always walk away, right? It's always within your um it's totally within your ability to do that. Obviously there are pitfalls to doing that, we only get paid when we work, and so you'll lose that. But at the end of the day, I'm a big advocate of your mental wellness is one of the most important things. It's how you show up. And so if that is a decision you got to make, you got to weigh that out with the pros and cons. So not an easy situation to be in. I know I've been in it before, and I stuck it out. And yeah, it's not easy. It worked out for me, but obviously every situation is different. All right. So I want to wrap things up. And so one of the things that we talk or we ask our guests, you being the first one, so it's always been either myself or Becca, but this time we'll ask you. This segment is called the Change Shelf. And so we ask just if there is a resource, a book, podcast, article, anything that you've read or has influenced the way that you are thinking differently about change management or even just your entrepreneur journey, just to recommend that for the listeners. So, is there any recommendation you'd give for the change show for this episode?
Well, I have mentioned a couple of them, Leading Change by Cotter, but the fun I have with this is trying to think about, well, how would I implement change without this element? How would I implement the change without a guiding coalition? Because that actually is the reality of change implementation. The Change Management Institute, Change Management Body of Knowledge, I find a very useful tool in terms of helping me support structured thinking. Um, and then a go-to for me, and we've talked about it in context of motivation, what motivates different people, how do we help stakeholders move along, is McClelland's theory of motivation, where he talks about, that there's three primary needs. This need for achievement, desire to succeed, the need for power, so the need to influence others, and the need for affiliation. And when we are making change, whether it is the impact on our sponsors or the people that we're working with, we are chipping at these core needs. And so being able to just think about the people that I work with, whether it's as collective cohorts or persona groups, or whether it is a individual supporting and leading into change, I find that a super useful tool in order to be able to think about the change.
Yeah, I'm thinking about these, and I remember we were talking about this McClellan series is kind of new to me, so I was like doing some research ahead of time, and I was like looking at that and saying like, yeah, the changes I'm working on right now, I can really see where I'm getting some resistance because there is change in power dynamics and what they felt like was important for them, whether that be title, pay, seniority. As part of an acquisition that I'm working on, it's you can definitely see the strain on affiliation and power that happens throughout that, and you can probably sense like that's probably at the bedrock of where the resistance is coming from. So definitely a really interesting theory to bring up, and I'm sure applies in all changes, and we'll put a link in the show notes around where you can read more about that theory. So just as we wrap up, I think two last things I want to ask you. Well, first off is, you know, incredible conversation today. If people are interested as they're listening to this podcast to, learn a bit more about you or to get in touch with you, where is the best or how is the best way for them to do that?
Thank you. I'm a LinkedIn advocate. I'm there a lot, and welcome LinkedIn connections. And so please look me up there. It's a fairly unique name, so it's not like you're going to find 100 Yvonne Thevenots.
That's great. Yeah, I can relate. Andrew Ourique is there's only one of us, at least that I know of. And then the last thing, just as we close, is really if there's any like call to action that you would give folks based on the conversation today.
Well, I know our discussion has been about change management, and it's also been about entrepreneurship. And I sort of smile and think back to a quote as yearbook editor I put in our high school yearbook graduation year. And it's from Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And when I was reaching a stage in my career where this opportunity to become an independent practitioner and to become a an expert professional in the space of change management presented itself, even though that didn't really exist at the time. End of the day, it didn't really matter because I've been doing it for, almost 20 years now and enjoying it tremendously, meeting so many amazing people, learning so much, staying fresh every single day as you go through the interactions and the idea and the passion around getting stuff done. And so, if you're looking at those two roads in the yellow wood, maybe the one that is less traveled by is the one that will bring you the most joy.
I love that, honestly, and I can relate so much. I just want to say thank you, Yvonne, for taking the time out today to chat with me. It was an incredible conversation. If you want to get in touch with Yvonne, we will put a link to her LinkedIn profile in the show notes so that you can do that. With that, I will just say thank you all for listening to this episode of the podcast. And Yvonne, thanks again for taking the time out and joining me here today.
Thank you, Andrew. Honored to be here, and best is with your podcast journey.
Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Bye now.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Wow, what a conversation that was. I'm so excited to have had the opportunity to speak with Yvonne. I just honestly no words to describe. I think it was an incredible conversation. We really touched on a number of really important concepts, and from just scratching the surface really of all of the work that it takes behind the scenes to start as an independent, what that journey kind of look like for Yvonne, really kind of starting out when this wasn't really a common thing for people. So really trying to set the groundwork and foundation for people like me that came in later. And she's been able to see it evolve over the years, which is really it's really been a privilege to be able to call her a colleague and a friend to lean on for advice, as I need to. And I really hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. As always, there are a number of topics that we still need to cover. So if you have any questions, any feedback, any ideas on some of the topics that you'd like to hear more about, please always reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn, Andrew Ourique. You can also email me directly at andrew@rerouteconsulting.com with your ideas. Don't forget, you can find us on not only LinkedIn, but you can find us on Instagram as well. Reroute Inc. is our Instagram, so you can find us there. And I'm really excited for the next round of guests that we have lined up for you. The next guest we've got is Rick Nason. I've talked about Rick before on the podcast, recommended his book, It's Not Complicated, and I get an opportunity to talk to him next month. And I can't be more excited to chat with my mentor and somebody I've had the privilege of learning from. And he's really the person who introduced me to the idea of complexity. And it's the linkage that complexity has with change management. And so I can't wait for that conversation. One other thing to I guess, talk about is that this month, October, we are launching our first ever webinar on really just talking about change management, the do's, the don'ts, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and really just trying to kind of provide a foundation and really just trying to extract some of my basic understandings of like what I've experienced with my clients and with managing change for over a decade now. And so I'm really excited to dive into that. More information around what that is going to be about will be coming in the next couple of weeks. If you are subscribed, if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, please make sure that you do. Information about that webinar is going to be included in this month's edition of the podcast, of the newsletter. So be sure to check that out. You can sign up through my website at rerouteconsulting.com. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I know I'm taking away a lot of learnings from today's episode. And so I'm really excited about the next lineup of guests that we've got coming up. I can't put it into words, honestly. It's going to be amazing. I'm really looking forward to those conversations. I hope you are too. So until next time, remember, don't be afraid to reroute. Bye, everybody.